I'm going for the phone stand, Okay, sorry about that, class. Greetings, good day. I am late. It is the 20th day of April, 2025. It is a Sunday, so you guys will have this class ready for you tomorrow, Monday, and it will still be on YouTube today. For those who are hearing the sound of my voice, welcome to the Social Sciences series. I am R.A. Blake, criminologist, criminal psychologist, profiler, and social scientist. And today's topic, we're discussing mental health in the criminal justice system, hypermasculinity, inmate partner violence, aggression, child abuse, and social support in the criminal justice system. So for those who are like, wait, what? The hypermasculinity is the term which will be decipher and how that correlates with intimate partner violence, how it affects children and child abuse, and how the social support of the criminal justice system can assist in such. Now, to begin, I need you guys to breathe, exhale. I am only going to go over the, it's only a 4 page, which means it's only a 25 minutes class today, which will be coupled with the hypermasculinity of female class, well, the hyperfemininity version of the hypermasculinity. So, to begin, there is a notion that a child's behavior may threaten the familiar dominance conceived by the men, and also that masculinity is being threatened when women dismiss their sexual prowesses, sexual advances. Mosher and Sirkin conceptualized hypermasculinity as a man's tendency to adhere to rigid gender role script. Researchers need to establish a relationship between hypermasculinity and criminality. The suggestions were adhered and studies were conducted to this correlation, which includes physical and sexual coercive behavior, verbally lowering frustration, tolerance, and lack of empathy. Osland, Fitch, and Willis in 1996 linked these type of men to a lack of empathy in rape-related scenarios. Now let's define psychopathy. Psychopathy is a social and psychological stance that comes to mind when describing hypermasculinity and lack thereof. Described as antisocial, they lack conscience and empathy, making them manipulative yet charming and callous. Though these men do not have full characteristics of psychopathy, they do possess similar traits. Hypermasculine scripts express excitement and anger, but relinquish empathy when they perceive behaviors and attitudes that threaten their masculinity. These men are called secondary offenders in the hierarchy of psychopathy. Their neurose is different. They are susceptible to violent reactions and will manipulate to control and complete a game. So many can say a psychopathy person has a borderline narcissistic tendencies because of the lack of empathy, the conceived notion that they're never wrong and it is always somebody else's fault, so there's just a reaction. Men who are considered hypermasculine have been found to regularly view women as sexual conquests and engaging in misogynic fantasies. Both behaviors increase the likelihood of engagement in sexual coercive behaviors and acts. Sexual coercive reports suggest that these men have a greater attitude acceptance of rape. So pretty much men who are said to be hypermasculine are considered hypermasculine regularly view women as conquests, and it's a fantasy, misogynic fantasies for them. Now, in regards to self-coercive self-reports, so these men pretty much do a self-report on themselves, they have a greater attitude acceptance of rape. So they think it's okay. Why? Because women are seen as sexual consequences and they're very callous, lack empathy in regards to that. Now, verbal aggression has been linked to child physical abuse and intimate partner violence. Now, intimate partner violence does not just mean female violence, it also means domestic violence against men. So let's get that conceived notion out the way. Research conducted and aggression and verbal abuse, as well as aggression and masculinity, is linked to May reports of psychological abuse, So, how I mentioned earlier how domestic violence against men, right? Verbal aggression found in hypermasculine men are said to be traced back to them being victims of domestic abuse or domestic violence during their childhood. So they have their own psychological abuse that they go through, passed it on. Studies conducted by Murphy and O'Leary in 1989, plus many other researchers, found that masculine men or hypermasculine men are more likely to perceive the female partners as being psychologically and verbally aggressive, which then leads them to intimate partner violence. Now, this part mentions men, but we have to remember female also do lack, um, how do I say it? Female also lack empathy in the sense that it is never their fault. So by leading to the psychological and verbally abusing the man, psychological abusing can mean, oh, you can't be nothing without me. You can't go no without me. That is psychological abuse. Verbal aggression, it means hitting, slapping. In Jamaica, throwing acid, throwing hot water. In England, it's shanking. In America, it's more likely like driving. So it varies depending on the country, but it's all intimate partner violence based on gender. Okay. Now, to go back to the men being the hypermasculinity part, these men may suffer from a couple of these mental disorders in order to counteract it. So you have conduct disorder. Conduct disorder as a child is similar to features of oppositional defiant disorder. Oppositional defiant disorder features like defying rules, frequent anger and resentment, being spiteful and vindictive. Also, a conduct disorder characteristics has three features that needs to be adhered to. These are aggression towards people, property destruction, and deceitfulness with theft. Deceitfulness with theft or deceitfulness and theft, interchangeable within themselves. This behavior transcends to adulthood and can develop in anti-personality disorder, APD. And at times substance abuse, which I should reiterate, doesn't mean that they're all psychopaths have antipersonal disorder. Not all psychopaths have OPD, which is oppositional defiant disorder. Not all psychopaths have conduct disorder, which is CD. But in relation to their lack thereof, empathy, their aggression towards people, resentment, being spiteful and vindictive, in this instance, it does apply to the hypermasculinity. Now, anti-personality disorder, as mentioned, leads to substance abuse, and it also has similar traits as narcissism and bipolar because of the lack of accountability. Now, intimate partner violence, which from here on in I'll be calling IPV, and child maltreatment, which I'll be abbreviated to CM, are intertwined. Now, according to previous studies, approximately 40 to 70% of domestic violence towards mothers and the children are more likely to be visible during the abuse stage of life. Men who are women beaters or women abusers have a stricter parental strategy than those who do not. This is according to Holden and Tichy 1991 research. With men taking on more household tasks, they feel their masculinity is being threatened and being demoralized. So the stay-at-home dads, this is where, for the mothers, this is where financial abuse come in under domestic abuse for men. Because you're making more money than this gentleman, you use it against him. I make more money than you, so you have to listen to what I say. I make more money than you, so you gotta stay home and take care of the house. And you push that, perpetrate that in front of him. That can lead to intimate partner violence because you are already doing domestic violence against him, domestic abuse. You are psychologically abusing him and financially abusing him. So in turn, he reiterates and self-defense physically abuse the female. So we do also have to remember that these men reciprocate, God bless, what they receive. With men making more wholesale. Now, we mentioned they're being demoralized, right? So this pent up angst can lead to, God bless, lead to abuse to either the mother or the children. Alcohol abuse is also a factor when considering IPV, and CM and neglect. For those who are like, I don't remember what IPV is. IPV is intimate partner violence. CM is child maltreatment. Okay, all right, clear. Now, according to Merrill, Harvin, and Milner in 1996, and I quote, 40% of the adults reported physical and abusive behavior and 56% neglected behavior, according to Keller et al. In 1994, found that they have been a victim of alcohol or drug abuse. Considerations from a psychological standpoint. One has to examine whether or not the children these men are cared for at home have any behavior problems, such as attention deficit disorder or ADHD, as most of you probably used to it as, but the full term is attention deficit hyperactive disorder, meaning that they're unable to complete tasks, do excessive talking, or easily distracted. These may create pent up anger and frustration within the parent and even aggression, especially in men. Evidence state that this behavior does affect parenting, will lead to depression and alcoholism. Alcohol was a variable in the study that found that alcohol can affect a person's parenting skills, especially if the man had to partake in parenting classes. So, for example, if he's a stay-at-home father or he has lost his job recently and he's at home, we're not saying that he is prone to abuse, alcohol or drug abuse, but that might lead him to alcohol and drug abuse based on the fact that the spouse, the wife, may do intimate partner violence or perpetrate intimate partner violence against them. To skip forward a couple of generations, the same children with ADHD can also grow up to be adults who in Frick 1994 found that these orders later lead to aggressiveness. So if ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, is not adjusted or treated whilst they are in the childhood teenager stage, once it becomes an adult, it gets passed over to aggressiveness. This study was made up of 55 adults, males, taking court sanctioned parenting class ranging from the age of 22 to 59. So, for those who know that the frontal lobe psychologically does not develop until you're 25, it is considered the 22-year-olds, and then it takes as much as the adults at the 59-year-olds. In that same study, 38.2% were married, 20% were single. These studies found that hypermasculinity scores were found to be significant predictors of the participants reporting. And these are the ones regardless of whether they are married or single. Single can also mean they're in a relation, as in they had a girlfriend, they have sexual partners. But just because someone is single doesn't mean they don't have sexual partners. So, and I quote, the studies found that hypermasculinity scores were found to be significant predictors of the participants reported verbal, physical, and sexual aggression towards their intimate partners. Child maltreatment was only a risk when there was no social support. So pretty much the abuse, intimate partner violence part of hypermasculinity is prevalent. They admit that, that's fine. But if they have no support, social support, no family support, then they are easy. That's when the child maltreatment occur. I'm gonna put a pause in that. You guys take a note, take a breather. I was because we know the attention spasm is 7 ± 2 for all my psychological students. You know exactly what I'm talking about. So this is the 15 minutes. I'm gonna come back and give you the other 15 minutes. This allows for you to soak in, take your break, and come back. Again, this is the course and the title Mental Health and the Criminal Justice System. For this series, we are discussing hypermasculinity, intimate partner violence, sexual aggression, child abuse, social support, and the criminal justice system. Again, I am Maureen Blake, criminologist, criminal psychologist, profiler, and social scientist, and we will be right back. Thank you so much.